let's do this. I've been meaning to make an Aeropress video for forever, but I'm not a huge coffee guy, and so I've always been kind of scared to do it. But here's why I think this is a really important video to watch. Number one, to talk about how the Aeropress has been holding up after 300 or so cups. And number two, it's because I'm like a diminishing returns guy. I usually try to find out where that is, and for me, diminishing returns on a really good cup of coffee is exactly at the Aeropress. I've had a variety of different coffee brewers. I've had one of my favorite ones was a Cuisinart one. That was really good, but you could only make like a pot at a time. I used to drink a French press all the time, but I hated all the particulate matter and it took way too long. I love the Keurig. That's kind of like the pinnacle of fast coffee. Speed, convenience, flavor. Can you balancing all those things? I think the K-Cup wins, but there's environmental concerns. And so that's where the Aeropress really was appealing to me. I mean, I've also tried the Maquinetas, I've also tried pour over coffee. That takes way too long and is way too finicky for me to do at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is when I normally wake up. And so like if you look at the side packaging, like on like a pound of beans or a pound of ground coffee, it tells you that you should be using 2 tablespoons for every 6 ounces of water that you're going to be adding. Now that's weird because if you look at an actual coffee pot, like a drip coffee pot, there's numbers. It says like 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I have no idea what those numbers actually correspond to. It's not cups in terms of like 8 fluid ounces is a cup. It's not 6 ounces for like 6 ounces is a cup of coffee. So I have no idea what that refers to. I know that in my 10-ounce mugs, if I made 4 cups of coffee in like a coffee pot, that would give me about 2 cups. So maybe like 16 to 18 ounces of liquid. So that's weird. So if you think about the amount of coffee you're supposed to use, whether you're using drip, French press, or Aeropress, and then do some of the math, I think you'll find it interesting because people complain that these are expensive, right? And so you can get these for like $1 a pod. I buy them at the office I buy them by like 70 something at a time because we got 3 people there now. And I think I get them for about 50 cents a pod. But I think if you get them anywhere between 50 and like 65 cents a pod for a cup of coffee, I think that's a pretty good price. Compare that to if you grind a pound of beans, that's 16 ounces of ground coffee, and then you think about you're supposed to use 2 tablespoons for every 6 cups. Let's call that a cup, and let's say that this is a cup as well, just 6 ounces. We'll use that just as kind of like our base denominator, and do some of the math there. The cost per cup of a pot of coffee is always going to be a lot cheaper because you're making a pot. There's very little waste. All you have is a paper filter, or if you have a metal filter, even better. But if you think about the amount of waste and the premium that I put on having a fresh cup of coffee, I remember I've done the math years ago thinking about like every 6 ounces of coffee that I make in one of these or in the Aeropress, usually with waste that you make in a drip coffee pot, ends up being maybe twice as expensive, and that's very loose math, and that's assuming that you don't drink an entire pot of coffee and there's always some left over at the end. So the exact math per cup, I think I remember it being like anywhere between 10 and 25 cents per cup of coffee, like 6 ounces of coffee, if you're 100% efficient using a drip coffee maker. And also that again depends on the quality of your beans. But if you're using the Aeropress and making coffee that way, then you have the same cost efficiency as a drip coffee maker, except you don't have any of the waste. So I really like that about it. I like that there's very little waste in terms of there's no K-cup pod, there's no cup, and the coffee is actually still pretty good. Now, let me go show you my actual Aeropress. Let me clean it out for you so I can actually show it to you. Mine's kind of gunky. I probably don't clean it out as nearly as much as I should. But let me show it to you so I can talk about how it's been holding up after 300 cups. So here's my Aeropress, and I just cleaned out that last cup of coffee that I made in there. using the metal filter. Quick update, I think I'm just gonna throw that metal filter away. I hate it. One of my favorite things about the Aeropress, so the coffee goes in, here's the base plate, the filter goes in there, you put the coffee on top, water, and then you press the plunger down. One of my favorite kind of aspects of using the Aeropress is when you're done, you unscrew kind of the top a little bit, and then you just kind of like, you just shoot out like the coffee grounds, and the filter come out as like a puck. Now if I need to save that filter, if it's metal, I had to peel it off, and then some coffee was stuck to the filter and some was still stuck on here, and it was very difficult to kind of like clean. So I think I'm gonna go back to the paper filters, but everything on this is holding up really, really well. I remember reading reviews saying, some people saying like the seal that this rubber kind of plunger part provides was getting loose for some people, and I didn't know if maybe like the rubber was degrading. I mean, it is hitting temperatures of 200 degrees every time you're using it, or more, for boiling water. And then some people, I think they said that their plastic was cracking. But I think a lot of people are putting this in the dishwasher. And maybe if you're putting it in the dishwasher for 300 cups, that might put a little extra wear and tear on both the rubber and also on the plastic. But for me, mine works just as good as the day I got it. Although I guess if I bought a new one, that would be the best way to really compare if it works just as well as the day I got it. But I haven't noticed any kind of like degradation in the performance. The coffee's still really good. All the parts seem to be holding up really well, and I'm very happy with the way this has been working out. This is my favorite way to make coffee when I have to go somewhere else and I'm traveling, if I'm at my in-laws and I don't have this, I always miss it, and I kind of like debate. It's pretty small, I could bring it with me, but that might be weird to show up to my mother-in-law's house with this thing. But that's my review, or I guess my update on the Aeropress after 300 cups of coffee, and I guess a quick comparison against other types of coffee that I've also tried. I enjoy. Some make better coffee, but they either have more waste, they cost more, or they take too long. So I feel like the Aeropress hits that sweet spot of, I need coffee now, I need it to be relatively cheap, and I don't want to have to destroy the entire world in order to get it.
Yo, what's going on?